welcome to the Infinite Potential Podcast. We're here with Steph for podcast number 3, and I am very excited to have her here with me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm
Thank
excited.
You for coming.
Yeah,
this is going to be fun. I know. So we were already kind of talking a little bit and tying in just some understandings in terms of energy and manifestation, which is
the same thing.
Same thing. Yeah.
It's like a religion. You say the
Yeah.
same thing. It's just differently said.
Different languages. It's an interesting thing because even a lot of the language that's starting to be used nowadays, you can see it's the same principles and the same understandings that really have been talked about for thousands of years. Repackaged with a new language, which is fine because now we need to understand it through our current language and understanding.
It's through what we're learning now as society, with everything that we hear when we're born to now, like adulthood, all of that. Like it has to be changed. The language has to be changed in order for us to understand it and have that clarity of what it really is.
Yeah, it's just like we were talking before. It's the evolution of it, right? It's just the evolution of the description of it, which is important because obviously the more clarity that we can have in terms of understanding, then the better oriented we are as to how we're gonna move, right? It's never just the one thing, and you know. I know you've been to enough of the Qigong classes with me that I've mentioned it numerous times. The information itself is not enough. There has to be work put in. There has to be actual training and practice. But the better and more clear the information is, at least you know you're going in the right direction. So that if you want to head to New York, you're not on your way to California, and vice versa. So. And I guess I would tie in also with manifestation.
Well, it's the same, right? And I think that's why I was attracted to the classes, because I felt like it does align a lot of what you're saying with the information base and the data of the body or the energies, right? It's the same thing with manifestation. Like there's always that inner self that has to be aligned in order for the manifestation to work. It's always working. It's just what at the end is what you're getting at the end is what we have to adapt and control and understand.
Yes. That's huge. And that's a great point because I think it can be, not everybody obviously, but it can be kind of understood as, okay, manifestation is just like I'm going to pick something that I want and then I'm going to do this and then I'm going to get it, right? And a lot of times it can be very disconnected from the sense of, first of all, how are you manifesting? And I don't mean just like, okay, what's the techniques or the methods, but in the sense of, are you searching and aligning with your soul's purpose, right? Versus something that can very easily be your mind can kind of convince you that this is what I need.
This is what you want, right?
This is what I want. I need this, but really it's just a much more base level kind of desire. It's a chasing thing. It's you're ultimately, and I've mentioned this a few times, right, where you have this innate joy, and that can easily be confused with, well, I need this thing to bring me joy, so I'm going to chase this thing.
That's huge.
And it's massive.
Oh, that's
because
so huge.
Then you're not manifesting. You're just leaking your energy all over the place. Is to me very different than saying, hey, you know what? Okay, this is in line with my soul's purpose. And then as you kind of come in line with that, you are automatically going to take your magnetism, right, to
another level,
a whole nother level. You're going to unlock that potential, and now you're manifesting, not so much as a doing, but in this kind of effortless, very natural result of staying connected to your center and your inner source and purpose, which makes a huge difference.
Huge. And I love the point. That is like, I think my motto has been in life about inner happiness, the inner joy we already have. There's nothing in the world that should be connected with happiness. It's all internal. And that just means that if everything goes away tomorrow, that internal being is always having that joy. It's always happiness. It's always that pure light being that we truly are. And that is like what creates manifestation or energies or everything else well worth the time.
Well worth the time. And I would even go so far as to say that nothing else initially is worth the time before that. I think that's where that's where life really begins, right? Once you've kind of achieved that level of connection and stability and freedom, which is a result of that. It's a freedom. Best word in a way, because without that, it's not that you're not free outside, it's that you're not free inside. You're controlled by all the things that you think you need, which is just programming.
Which is human nature. It's like the human part of us, which is what it is. You know, we're not controlled by it. It's more of
programming.
Inner, subconscious, conscious mind, where it's internal. And
that's where rebuilding, reestablishing, let's say, that level of connection to the inner world is kind of like a missing first step. It's something that we should all be taught. We should all really work on building that relationship first before we try to build any outer relationship. And I don't just mean an outer relationship with a person, but everything in a way is a relationship, right? The job that you have, the people in your life, every single thing is just, in that view, a relationship. But if the relationship with your inner self is not there and established first, then you're going to lose yourself.
Right. And that's when you start putting your relationships as a priority. Like, that's when you start figuring out that it's mandatory to be happy with someone, or it's mandatory to have this amazing job, or it's mandatory because your soul is looking for that happiness because it's not aligned with your happiness.
And at that point, that is the end of circulation, because then you're a taker.
Yeah.
You need this in order to have this, right? So by definition, now you're a taker. And energy, the way that it works, if you just understand the simple nature of it, right? It has to circulate, it has to move, it has to flow. So that stops the circulation of it. Once you have reconnected and reestablished that inner wholeness, now you're actually a giver. Now you're connected, whole, and overflowing from the inside out. You're moved by joy, right? You're moved by your inner heart. You're not moved to try to get something for joy or have this so that you can feel this or feel that. No, you're connected and overflowing in that alignment. Now you're in alignment.
Right.
Now you're going to naturally take these actions and these movements in your life that are spirit moving through you, right? And that's the old Taoist concept, Wu Wei, right? Wu Wei tends to get translated, right, as do nothing, right? And yeah, okay, I guess you could say do nothing, right? But it doesn't mean that you literally just, sit on the edge of the bed all day and do nothing physically. It means that there's no
it's like
contrived.
That sense of control too.
It's a control thing, 100%.
Yeah.
Because that controlled action.
Yeah.
Contrived, manipulated, controlled action from the mind to try to get something is out of sync and out of alignment with, let's say, surfing the wave of energy that is life, right? And so when you let go and when you can empty, then you can be filled from the inside, and that will show up outside.
No, that's 100.
No control.
That's a great way of viewing it. And that's, and I, in a more sense of, as a parent, I tell this to my kids in a more standard language. I tell them, well, you guys want to be assets to society. I don't want you guys to be liability to society. And that's huge. I've been teaching this like concept to them since they were toddlers, like going into different things, like, hey, and in different languages, of course, but like, hey, we don't do this because, you know, we're looking at it as we're not taking, like you mentioned, taking, but in a sense of liability. And it's something that we try to teach our kids.
That's a beautiful thing, because that's not something that obviously every kid necessarily has access to. So it's a wonderful thing. And the way that I see it is you're kind of really almost speeding up their development and their maturation, because, you know, as kids, it's kind of, you know, it's kind of natural. You cry, you get something, right? You really, you don't have the resources necessarily at that point physically to sustain yourself. And that can very easily become a pattern.
A habit, pattern.
Yeah.
There's so many misleading things in life that can turn into a negative person overall. Like, just simple as that. Very negative person.
Yeah, and what's so beautiful about that is it also kind of shows us that those are energetic patterns, right? And wherever they may come from, even if it's well-intentioned or whatever it might be, those patterns will shape us throughout our lives. And it's really absolutely key to be able to purify and dissolve those particular patterns. They're just energetic shapes. They can drive seemingly massively intense behaviors, but they're just energetic shapes. And so if you can access the energetics directly and release those, it can really lead to a level of transformation both inside and outside that can't be accessed any other way. It's got to touch the energy.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that also goes into what we were just talking about, that internal being. You're looking at it completely different. Growing up, in manifestation, the same language you're using right now, we use as limiting beliefs. It's that energetic pattern. Same thing. We're just saying it in two different terminologies.
Yep.
Right? It's limiting beliefs. Once you cut down the limiting beliefs, when you go back into, oh, well, you know, this happened, or, you know, I feel this way about a lot of examples, like a lot of money. People feel certain ways towards money, and if you go back to their childhood, there is like one thing or two things that spark that energetic pattern, which is for us like limiting thoughts, limiting beliefs. Now, once you understand them, they're very easy to break. You just got to go back into that inner work, that inner self.
Yeah, and that's huge, because I think that's the whole kind of that's the whole direction, right? That's really what needs to be done to kind of unlock everything else. The beauty of that, right? So Qigong wise, right, energetics wise, what you have is, let's say, to use your word, right, these limiting beliefs or these energetic patterns. So we have obviously a body, right? I mean, you got muscles, you got bones, you have organs, you have a nervous system, a hormonal system behind that, right? And then behind that, you have these energy flows that, you know, can be called meridians, whatever words you want to use, but there's these kind of like rivers and creeks of energy, and then there's energy centers, vortexes, right? Chakras, whatever you want to call them again. And then behind that, you have source, right? You have behind all the duality, behind the yin and yang, now you get to the non-dual, right? The still point, the spiritual level energetics. And at that level, by understanding the nature of these energetic patterns and being able to connect and return them to the still point, to that layer of these variety of energy centers allows for the particular shape that the energy took to be melted back, to returned back to its pure essence, its pure form, right? Kind of like you can freeze water into any particular shape.
Right, the state of it.
That's just the state of it. Now you can return it back to its essence. And so that still point at the center, right? As you begin to build that, right? You do the practice. You learn a good Qigong, you do the practice, the center and your connection to it begins to build and to be embodied, not as an idea, but to actually transform the way everything else shows up. Those energetics will inform and transform posture, breath, the way you move, the way you think, the way you feel. Once that connection is there, now you can really talk about being grounded, right? Without that, it's still just a surface level kind of grounding. But as you ground into that central layer, right, and really establish a direct, accessible, conscious connection, it begins to overflow and inform all the rest of those energetics very, very effortlessly, very, very naturally, right? And I think that that's an important point to understand, because I think that in a lot of this stuff, whether it's just a meditation practice in general, a manifestation in general, or just how you show up for life in general, a lot of us are trying too hard.
Right. And it's not natural.
It's very unnatural.
And if we understood that that is what our nature is, like aside from like we talked about the human nature, aside from the human nature, this is that inner nature. We are able to do that, meditate, whatever it is, manifestation, either one, right? You're able to use it in a very natural way. We are meant to do it.
Yeah, I love, actually, I think that's a great sentence, right? We're meant to do it, and we're always doing it. As you become more conscious and connected, your efficiency grows, right? You know, like, it's the same type of thing, right? You've got a few kids.
Right.
They start walking, they don't start walking perfectly, and then all of a sudden they're doing, somersaults and gymnastics. No, it's clunky at first. They start to get a feel for it. They start to develop, and that becomes obviously smoother, clearer as their connections begin to develop. And in an overall development for us as human beings, it's kind of the same thing, right? At first, you start to develop this conscious connection to the energetics, and it can seem very almost difficult or very foreign, right? It's unfamiliar. But then at a certain point, you kind of cross over and you're like, wow, okay, this is me. This is actually more real than the me that I thought I was before.
Right.
And it becomes very natural, very flowing. And I do think it's part of our natural evolution and development. I think we just get stunted. And I think we get stunted because of way out of balance overuse of mind.
Right.
And that will eventually encapsulate all of our experience and sever our connection to the rest of us.
Right. No, 100%. Yeah. It does. It has a huge part. Like we are meant to do all that, but it also has to do with when we're born in a family, what kind of beliefs we're born into, growing up, what kind of ideas we were taught or ingrained, that we forget that side.
Yeah.
And that's when we just go back. I think we are meant to be stumped. We are meant to have those little challenges, because it does bring us back to remembering, because I think it's just a remembering thing.
Yes.
Of who we truly are deep, deep, deep inside.
Yep. Which is the ultimate connection that needs to be made. That's it. It's the Qigong. When somebody asks, okay, what is Qigong? What does it do? What is the purpose of it? And there's a lot of different descriptions that can be given.
Right.
but at heart, right, the first and foremost and one of the most important aspects of it is that remembering who you truly are. Mm-hmm. And energetically speaking, the more patterns, mm-hmm. the more things you pick up, right, that hold the energy and slow the energy down. Mm-hmm. You start learning these things. You learn thinking and overthinking, and you learn, fear, and you learn how to basically use your mind and therefore not use the energetics, disconnect from the energetics, and really slow them down, and therefore slow the vibration and lower the particular vibrational frequency of the energetics. And so the important point is knowing that informationally is not enough, because no piece of information is ultimately going to reconnect you and raise the vibrational frequency. Your mind, and this is the real important point I want to make, your mind cannot change or raise the vibratory frequency of your energetics. The mind can only work and can only affect within the particular vibrational range of mind. So if you have all these different energy centers, let's say, excuse me, and you have all these different vibratory frequencies that you can tune to. Mind is a particular frequency. Mental and mental activity is a particular vibration. So anything done from mind is going to be limited to the vibrational frequency of mind. When our consciousness, again, attention, awareness, consciousness, and mind, two different things.
Two different, right.
One is free-flowing and can connect to and move through a variety of vibratory frequencies. And part of what the Qigong does is expand your range of the vibrational frequencies you can tune to, right? Some people have a radio station that's stuck on two stations. You want to expand the range of your antenna, right? But again, this can't happen with mind. Mind is one channel, is one station. So everything done through mind is still going to be trapped, let's say, in that one particular station.
Right, and that's huge.
It is.
I think nowadays, because everybody talks more of mind being manifestation, it's like incorrect. It is it's the conscious mind that we're talking about. It's not the mind. The human mind is very different than what the conscious we're talking about. This is human. We're talking about being. And a lot of people get that confused, and when they manifest or they use meditation or they use any of the techniques, they're going off of what their mind, their limitation of mind can do. And that is a huge difference from someone really manifesting, like we said, effortlessly, naturally, to somebody that is stuck on limitation.
I love that, and I think you mentioned that in your book, and that's probably one of the things that hit the biggest, right? Because that's such an important point. Right. I mean, it's such an important point, because without that, there is no manifestation. It's just thinking. Right. You're fantasizing, you're pretending, you're thinking, you're intellectualizing, but that does not guarantee that you are having an energetic imprint, an energetic influence.
Yeah, and that's it's so important, because we hear it so much now. You hear it online, you hear it everywhere, and once you truly understand that point, this is where the breakthrough comes in. This is where everything else just starts aligning to getting yourself into that better state that we all have. It's like
yeah.
unlimited. If we
Yeah.
understand how beautiful that creation is of us being, just a being, not a human, but a being, literally just that alone breaks through any barrier. Any barrier.
That's I really think speaks to the heart of the work, whether it's manifestation or anything.
Right.
You know, if we are the embodiment of the universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are directly connected to the
source.
entire source, right?
The source.
How can there be anything but this magnificent beauty, right?
Yeah.
So if there's not, and if that's not showing up, then it's less of a question of, well, how do I make that show up?
Right.
And more of a question is, well, what's happening that's blocking or separating me from accessing what should be and really is so natural. So natural. And of course that comes down to just operating in an unnatural way, which has become very common. Just
Right.
because it's normal, though, doesn't mean that it's natural. And that little, I mean, I don't want to say little, but these shifts that are simple, you know, maybe not easy, and I understand there's work to go through, but as long as action is taken in that direction, it's an effortless effort. And because you're aligning with your nature, it's kind of like as you step in that direction, everything reorganizes to support you.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing because
yeah.
it's natural.
And it is a beautiful thing because life is meant to be beautiful. Life is meant to be that. If we think of how great the universe and how it functions and all these amazing things that we're able to experience, just looking outside, like how the plant grows, how the sun comes out, how you see the painting at night when there's different colors in the sky. Just looking at that and understanding that it's way beyond us. And now we're looking at the universe very differently. Now we're looking at our purpose very differently. Now we're looking at our desires very differently.
I'm super happy you used that particular word, purpose.
Right.
Because it's a big thing that you hear a lot nowadays.
Yes.
You know, I want to find my purpose. What's my purpose? And it's always interesting because purpose really is more, it's something that is always communicating from the depths of you. You don't intellectualize it. It's not this established, solidified thing that's written down and, okay, this is your purpose.
Right.
It's communicated in every single moment. It's signaled through every piece of you, on every level of you, with this innate virtue. Not virtue in the understanding of okay, the virtue is you know, this ethical moral behavior, but the old English definition of virtue, which is this inherent force, this inherent direction. Like a wave has an inherent direction, we as a wave of energy also have an inherent direction.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
We are the universe and we have this inherent virtue. The mind obviously can knock you off your surfboard, right?
Right.
But if you can get out of the mind and surrender, right? This is, I think, one of the hardest points for people is the fear of surrender. The mind,
letting go.
The mind doesn't want to let go.
Right.
It wants to hold that grip on every piece of reality and really squeeze the life out of it.
Right.
But, and this is really one of the core virtues of being able to successfully practice a meditation at Qigong, is the capacity to surrender, to release. Not even so much as a doing, but to allow yourself to simply be with everything exactly as it is, no desire to change it or make it different. And then the part of you that does want to change it and make it different, be aware of that too, because that's not you. You are the observer of it all.
Right.
So can you sit in that awareness and be? And from there, that is the ultimate surrender. And that will connect you directly to your inherent virtue, which is your purpose. It's not a piece of information.
Right.
It flows right out from the heart. Yes.
It wasn't written down and said, hey, when you come here, don't forget this is what your purpose is.
You want to know your purpose? Close your mind and open your purpose.
Right. And that blockage, which is really that, like we talk all about, the human nature, right? The blockage that doesn't let us hear. When we sit down in silence, and I feel like this goes with the Qigong and the meditation, when we sit down in silence, or we just talk to ourselves, we get so much more information than anyone could tell us. And that is, like, we don't hear this often. It's huge. Once we internally silence the part that kind of obstructs us, the noise, right? Then we start really understanding the who, the what, the how. It tells us exactly what to do. And this little tiny thing, the little voice that we hear, is truly that inner subconscious self.
And that is a massively important relationship to rebuild.
Right.
And the idea of energy carries information, right? So as your communication builds with your deeper inner energetic aspects, there is a form of communication that's established, and that information is the universe speaking to you through you, right?
Right.
You know, there's a lot of talk nowadays of cellular level intelligence and the intelligence that's encoded into our DNA, right? Which connects directly to the stuff of the universe itself,
source, right?
You can tap into that.
Yeah.
You can absolutely tap into that. And this is not an intellectual process. This is not about reading a book about, well, this guy said this and this guy said that. To be and
it's
sink
that
into.
remembering part.
Yes.
We already know how to do everything. We
It's
know
right
how
there.
to do the steps. We don't need to learn. We don't need knowledge on it. It's already there.
Just surrender to it.
Just understanding, right, that part.
The surrendering of the intellect mind, right? That informational based mind to the bigger mind, the higher mind. That links you up with your higher self, which again, it's directly connected to all of these aspects. All of that inner information is there once you begin to reopen the pathway. It's almost like, and this is where the Qigong really can show itself extremely powerfully, is it's almost like if you had a highway and the highway's there, right? The highway didn't disappear, but there's a massive like traffic jam on that highway. Nothing can get through. So it doesn't mean that the highway's gone. It doesn't mean that there's nothing on the other side. It just means that you don't have a connection to it. It's not smooth, it's not established, and there's no communication moving from one side to another. So by clearing out the energetic pathways throughout the body, throughout the various energy centers, and understanding how to do that properly, can reestablish that relationship, and therefore the lines of communication from these inner, deeper aspects of ourselves to our consciousness. Consciousness, what we are conscious of, is simply streams of information, right? How many streams of information do you have access to? The talk of expanding awareness is just a way of saying expanding the awareness to include and tap into consciously other streams of information, other vibratory frequencies that carry information that just because you may not be currently aware of it doesn't mean they're not there.
Right.
So the expansion to include higher streams of information into our conscious awareness is how we can evolve and grow and learn to tune into these vibratory frequencies that carry information and
right.
higher level information. And this is exactly what a good Qigong or any good meditation system will do.
Right.
And it's all there and it's all available. And if somebody's tried meditation before, or Qigong, or whatever name it went by, but if they tried it before and maybe found it lacking in some way, it's not the thing itself. It's that nowadays finding a good, solid, complete system can be tough, right? Because you have that double-edged sword of, you got everything
too
on,
much information.
Yeah, you have everything on the internet.
Too many techniques.
A million different
Right.
things, but if it's not, let's say, connected to a full system where you don't have a clue as to how to put certain things together, then, okay, but that's not a reflection on, let's say, meditation or Qigong itself. And so for anybody out there that has tried meditation, right, and maybe not gotten what they wanted to get out of it, right, depending on what it is they expected to get out of it, but that could be another story.
Right.
Check yourself and check what you accessed, how well you accessed it, and be fair and be honest with it, right?
Right.
So yeah, but yeah, it's a beautiful thing when you really start to call into you these higher vibratory frequencies and the information. And I don't just mean word-based information, right? But the information that they carry. And we all know that.
We have access, like you mentioned. It's a higher mind conscious. That it's not mind. It's like the universe mind. Which is comparison to what we understand. It's we can't understand it. There's some points that we understand what we can, with the limitation of still having our human mind, because that connection is going to be there. We're here for a reason on that aspect.
Yeah.
But then if you really start looking at it, it's so incredibly
vast
that you can't even, your mind can't comprehend it. We can't fully understand it.
That I think is a very important point, because we can kind of stick ourselves, right? We can kind of limit ourselves trying too hard to understand it. That's the opposite of the surrender, right?
Right.
We want to surrender. We want to not try to understand it in the sense of grasp at some conceptualized idea, of model of it, because that's all the mind can do, is produce a model of it.
Right.
That's what the mind does. The mind is the maker of models. It makes stories and ideas and conceptualized models of reality, but is not reality itself. So the only way to experience reality itself is outside the mind, right? Let me repeat that again, because that's an important point that I really hope is clear.
Yeah.
If the mind, by nature of the mind, and again, this doesn't make it good or bad or right or wrong, it's a tool, and this is its purpose, right? The mind is the maker of models. That's what it does. It makes models, pattern recognition, right? Stories, ideas, and concepts about reality. So if you want to have an experience of reality itself, it cannot be through the mind. It has to happen outside the mind.
Its capacity is very limited.
Very limited.
Very limited. You can't ask for a 2-year-old to understand geometry. It's simple as that. It's a different level.
Yeah.
And yes, I that's an amazing point. Like, it does create that model.
Yeah, which is, like you were saying, right? That's the limitation in and of itself.
Right.
I mean, yeah, it has its uses, it has its purpose, right? So you don't run out into the middle.
We're meant, no matter what.
Yeah.
It's meant to be here. It's meant
It has a purpose.
It has, right.
You don't want to run into the middle of the street and stand in front of a bus, right?
Right.
You need to understand what happens if that happens, right?
Right.
So that model is there. It's just got to be integrated with higher aspects, deeper aspects of us.
That's the connection, the different planes of connection, that once it's all in a line, it flows so well. And that goes with, and Qigong, I love that part of it, because it does understand the flow. The flow is so important, because that it does give us that fulfillment, or that understanding based on, what the universe really
how it works.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. That's 100%. It's very easy, let's say, depending on how you look at things, to look at it as different.
Right.
But at heart, truth is truth, right? And whatever language a individual uses, or however it's described, if you get to the heart of it, not just the outer surface of it, right? The truth is truth. And, the nature of energy, the nature of the way the universe works, the necessity of circulation and flow, these things are what they are. And if they're not seen as part of a person's reality, then it's simply a matter of not belief, right? Because I never ask anybody to believe anything, just enough to practice, right? But if you do the practice without believing anything, because what's a belief? It's another model. It's another idea. It's the very thing that separates you from the actual experience of it.
Right.
So Qigong is just the experience of energetics.
It's connecting the body part, which is, it's not used in many other techniques, right? So you're using it to practice in a way of letting go of that, the mind part, but
The
in
obstruction.
in a very flowing way for the body.
Very important point you just said. Super important. This is missed a lot, right? Where the body is an aspect of us, and it's a very important aspect of us. It is our vehicle here, right? And so if we look at it, let's say, for example, in terms of the chakra system, because I see this, and I'm actually very happy you brought it up, because it's a moment to talk about a dangerous misconception. And I see this all the time, too often, where the lower energy centers are looked at as, bad, or these are not spiritual. These are lower, more worldly stuff. And then I'm going to move to the upper chakras and, the heart and the third eye. These are the spiritual centers, right? So let's clarify something that is super important. That is nonsense. Okay, that is absolute nonsense. And if you believe that, if somebody believes that, it's just a belief. You are lacking the actual experience of it, because the reality of it is the chakras, the energy centers, let's just take the main ones, right? The main chakras, they have layers. You have these outer layers, and you have at the center the deep still point that is basically can be thought of as a direct connection to the universe itself. That's the still spiritual center point, right? Every energy center has these different layers, okay? So the spiritual aspect of an energy center, let's say, is not a question of, which chakra am I in?
Right.
The heart chakra is spiritual, but this one is not.
Right.
Well, no. It's really more of a question of, at what layer of the chakra are you connected to? Because let's take the heart chakra, for example, right? The heart chakra can also be the home of extremely ugly shades of jealousy and possessiveness and control. And so in and of itself is not necessarily the spiritual chakra, or same for third eye or whatever it may be. It's very important to understand that all the energy centers need to be purified and well blended and integrated and connected to the center point, right? The the still empty center that, let's say, connects to the universe, which again, not asking anybody to hold any particular set of information or belief about, do it and see. All of this stuff comes down to do it and see. It's not about ideas and models and concepts, right? But that needs to be made really, really clear, because it's a dangerous piece of information for somebody that thinks the lower energy centers are lower as in bad and the higher ones are good, because that, if you practice along that kind of a model, you are going to unground yourself, disconnect yourself, and really mess with the proper natural function and circulation of your innate energetics. There is a natural way that we function, that we work, right? Nobody, let's say, eats food with their nose and digests food with their kidneys. There's a job and a purpose for all the variety of aspects on that particular layer of existence. And so the energetics work.
Functions.
They all have a
like
function.
You mentioned, yes,
that's 100%.
We use the mouth for eating,
Yep.
but I mean, we smell the food.
Right.
We use our eyes to see. We then have digestive system to digest the food.
It all has a function.
It all has a function.
And that's why you really, if you're going to work directly with the inner energetics, right, it's very important that you are working with a good solid system, because if you're going to start playing with, let's say, the energetics, and if somebody doesn't necessarily know what they're doing, it can be very easy to mess with things that, let's say, shouldn't be messed around with. Physically, it's a little more obvious, right? If I asked you to walk into the gym and squat 800 pounds, you know you can't do it,
right.
Unless you can. Maybe you can, I don't know. But if you can't do it, you pretty much know you can't do it,
right.
and so you know to stop, right, before you put pressure in the wrong way and hurt yourself. So it's the same thing. Until you develop enough of a conscious connection to the energetics that you innately understand how it works. Because ultimately, you do know everything. You just got to remember.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a major part, just remembering. Yeah. And I think that's why when I wrote the book, I made it when I wrote Roll Your Dice, I made it very clear for people to understand. That's something that it's very hard to explain, and I feel like it needs to be detailed of exactly the chakras or whatever it is. I never learned it that way. I learned it as a whole. We're a whole spiritual. It's spiritual, mind, and the connection of our being. So all of it is one. And if we understand that, I specifically tried to make the book in a way that it's very standard. People are going to understand that without having to deal with, well, what about this chakra, or what about this eye, or like the third eye, or whatever it is. It's a whole. We're doing a whole spiritual connection that once the connection is there, you can feel everything different. I mean, even the sense, like you were saying, the sense of how you look or how you act, or things that don't bother you anymore. Now you're in that being state.
And it's real. It's
so real.
It's different when it's you trying to be something else, right? Versus actually transforming and opening up, and obviously the transformations that take place through opening up to those other connections, which actually changes you. You know, it's very easy. I've seen this a lot, and it's very easy. You read a book, you hear about how you should be. There's plenty of people around that would love to tell us how we should be. This is right, this is wrong, this is how you should feel, this is how you should think. But you are who you are, right? And so you can pretend to be that, right? Like the guy who, you know, the classic funny example, the guy who walks the old lady across the street, right? Because, not because he wants to, not because he cares, but because that's the right thing to do and that's going to win me points, right?
Right.
Those are same action, but two very different energetics.
Right.
And so the actual transformation, it's why I've never been one to try to be a certain way. Mm-hmm. If I feel a certain way or I am a certain way at this current place in time, because ultimately, right, we're nothing. So therefore we're everything. Right. We're just energy. But if this is how my energy is showing up, mm-hmm. it's much more important to understand why, how, to be willing to see and look at myself exactly as I am at this moment without judgment, without saying, oh, but this is not good. This person says it's bad and society says it should be like this and like that. Those are all ideas. Now, I'm not saying you have to act on it, right? That's a different story, right? Obviously, there's right and wrong in the sense of having a properly functioning society.
Of course, right.
But if it's in you, it's in you. And pretending it's not there is not going to make it go away.
It actually magnifies it.
Yes.
Because you're putting a lot more energy into hiding it than actually letting it flow. Like it's like a bad thought. We always say this as the manifestation part in the law of attraction. And when you have the negative thought, you don't go and sit there and say, well, I'm going to put it away. I'm going to put it away. Like, I'm not going to think about this as a negative thought. Let me transform it into a positive thought. You're still putting energy in that negative thought, which magnifies what you're thinking about. And then if you, of course, the human mind goes from one instant to another instant to another instant and magnifies the whole negative thought to a negative event. To
stuck
a negative,
right on
like, you're stuck on it.
You end up stuck right on it and wrapping it tighter and tighter into your energetic system, patterning that, cementing that pattern deeper and deeper, ingraining it deeper and deeper, rather than, and this is the funny thing about it, but again, now this is the nature of the mind. The mind is not going to release you of these things. The mind's nature is judgment, because the mind is of duality. It's of yin and yang, right? That's where the mind manifested from. And
it has to be that way.
Because it's its nature. It can't be any different.
It cannot be any
Water is wet, right? That's it. That's just what it is. Right. And so by using the mind to try to free ourselves of these energetic patterns, it doesn't work that way. Right. It actually, like you said, works the opposite way. So rather than, if you're going to bring your mind to your energy or your judgment to your inner condition, right, you're only going to make it worse, and you're only going to freeze it in place and stick it deeper. And rather than, now, if you could bring your beingness, the beingness has no judgment, right? Soul consciousness, it just is. It's pure awareness. So if you can allow that awareness to be fully present with all that you are, there's no more, oh, good or bad or right or wrong. No. You sit wide open, completely connected to exactly what's moving through you at any particular moment without any resistance, right? What's going to happen? Very naturally, very effortlessly,
it goes away.
It releases.
It does. Right.
But the trick that I always find very interesting, right? The trick is you can't do that from a place of wanting to release it. That's
it's
more
the need. It's the need. It's like you can't manifest, a new job if you need a new job, because you don't have a job. So that's when it goes to the need comparison to what you really desire and what you really want.
Beautifully said. So what is that, right? Let's give people a nice experience of that, right? What is, we say the word need, right? So what is a need? And I don't mean like, oh, I need to eat, or I need to, do this, or I need to do that. What does need feel like, right?
You're desperate. It's like a desperation. So now you're going into that other energy that turns into kind of
the need, right? As ultimately the model we use to describe this energetic condition of immense contraction, friction, right? This burning inside that's really can be experienced as the same way you can close your fist and hold it really tight, happening on a deeper layer.
Internal and outer layer. Like there's
That's
so
where it
many
shows
layers.
up.
Yeah.
You contract energetically, right? You hold yourself energetically. You want and you try and you force so hard. And of course, then that shows up in
So many
chaos.
different, right.
Rather than, now this is the beauty of it, and even it ties right in with purpose, like we were talking about, right? You need to find your purpose. You want to try so hard, you cut yourself off from that very connection that allows for the communication and flow to happen. So what's the difference then from need, right, versus, and we've all had that experience where something, you decide to do something, right? Whatever it may be, it doesn't matter. It's the internal that I want us to pay attention to, right? You decide to do something, you're going to take an action, or, you know, even when you were a kid, you know, you wake up, you're going to do this particular thing today, and your insides are just, you are lit up. Everything is open. You feel like the entire sky is inside you. You are wide open. There's energy coursing through you. There's no resistance. You are on, right? Those are two very, very different energetic conditions. And I would go so far to say that that's all that matters, in the sense of everything else is a model or description of some spectrum on those energetics. We call certain emotions certain names. Right. We call other emotions other names. We look for situations to drive certain emotions, et cetera, et cetera. That's just
different
models.
Things to, right. That's
just the models.
Right.
But ultimately what we're doing is we are seeking out this energetic condition, right? Or labeling and defining a particular energetic condition, but you are either in a state or condition of contraction or expansion.
Right.
One is the idea of contraction, this idea of separation, of closure, of shutting down, is all associated with the opposite of life, right? Life is associated with expansion and opening and flowing and movement and energy and connection. So if you want to cultivate the life force rather than disconnect and separate yourself from the life force, then that makes sense.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very important point that I really hope is clear for everybody.
Yeah. No, that's huge. And I love when you said it turns on. It turns on. So in looking at that in outer perspective, right? So now you're turning on with the desire of need, with the energy of need, I'm going to say. Same thing goes with, I talk about this in the book as emotions. We call it my manifestation emotions. It's the same thing, just said very differently. So, for example, if I'm turning on that energy as soon as you start feeling something. So if I feel I need it, I'm turning it on. If I feel that I'm grateful for it and I love everything and all these great positive emotions, I'm turning it on. You're turning it on regardless of if it's a need base or it's a grateful experience or whatever it is.
So that's awesome, right? I love how you're putting that. So the way that I kind of digest that, right, would be turning on and how much you can access, right? For example, you could turn a car on, right? But if you got the emergency brake on, it's not going to go anywhere, right? Or it's going to create quite an issue. So it gets very interesting because in terms of connecting to and using your energy, let's say, right? The amount of power you have access to, right? Let's put it simple. If you think about it, in meditation itself too, there's a balance of yin and yang that needs to be achieved. A lot of meditation is taught simply from the perspective of one thing, right? It gets associated with just, let's say, turning off, right? Resetting, relaxing, calming down, and, stillness, which is critical, of course. The other half of that, though, is the activation, right? The intensity of the energetics.
Right.
Intense, I remember one of my first teachers said that, and it's stuck with me ever since, right? Intense does not mean tense. Intense and the level of on that you can achieve is directly proportionate to the level of activation minus tension, because tension will actually block you from accessing that. So if you're turning on in a need-based way, you're turning on, but you can't use it. It's blocked. It's cut off. The brakes are on. There's too much resistance to really get through. It's like a clogged pipe.
And you won't get to where you want to be. You're limited to that. You're stuck. You're stuck to where you are because of that. It's not flowing. It's not where it's even if it takes you where you want to be, it's not going to take you in a great pathway.
It can't. And it makes sense, because if you need to plug in, right, to access the juice, to access, let's say, into an electrical outlet, but halfway through that cord is cut, right? Because you're resisting, you're holding it back. The circuitry is not complete. There's no flow and connection. So it's important to, and I would say those two energetic states of contraction versus expansion are a matter of activation, right? The turning on, the immersion and opening to an activation of the energetics, and how connected you can remain to the energetics without jumping out of them, and therefore disconnecting the flow, right? So just because I'm not sure if that was clear.
No, that's good.
It makes sense.
It makes sense, because in a way that I would teach it would be the energetics is the emotions. You activate it with the emotion. If you stay in the emotion, for example, when we want to manifest something, I don't know, a soulmate, right? When you want to manifest a soulmate, you're in the state of emotion of love and happiness and all this, great things that you're going to feel with the person. And that is the energy that's flowing out. If you continue to stay in the energy, that's when you're going to get somewhere, right? When the car actually moves. But if you don't, and you go into the other state of desperate, you need this person in your life, you need this soulmate for whatever reason, then now you're stuck. You're never going to find the soulmate.
This is why I think most people that are having difficulties, let's say, in making things happen, right? I think one of the big reasons for that difficulty is the capacity that most of us have to stay connected to an intensely alive inner energy while simultaneously remaining completely still, so that the mind does not disrupt that flow. That is not something that usually, without a particular training, that most people have a very high capacity for. When the energy starts to get really intense, and this is a big thing, this is a big reason why I think a lot of people have emotional problems. Because what is an emotion? An emotion is just an overwhelming amount of energy moving through you, meaning it's an activation of your system beyond its current capacity to remain comfortable. So therefore, we run away from it. We constrict and contract around it because we don't want to feel it, because we can't handle that level of energy, and therefore we freeze it up into ourselves and in our body, which is why we all know the knots in the stomach that are felt, the anxiety and all those feelings, which are nothing other than energy stuck, disconnected from, and frozen in place, right? And so the building, and this, by the way, is a major thing that the Qigong does, because it strengthens your pathways and your nervous system to the point where you can hold your space with the intensity of energy moving through you that can allow you to stay with those energies so that they can process and flow.
Yeah,
right?
that's great.
Very, very, very important. And so remaining connected to the energetics in their intense state. And again, the balance, yin and yang, and being able to not bring mind into the picture, but to stay fully felt, to feel the absolute fullness of that energy without the mind coming in to make models and definitions, and this means that, and I wish this, and I want that, and this is good, this is bad. None of that just distorts and disturbs the energetic flow. But cultivating the capacity to hold those energetics, right? To stay centered in those energetics, which, by the way, tying back to what we talked about a little while ago, it's absolutely critical that you have successfully and powerfully developed these lower energy centers, because without the grounding and centeredness that a developed lower energetic area has to offer, you simply do not have the stability to really allow for that, right? The balance there is absolutely critical. So developing that capacity to hold those energetics, stay in those energetics, ride with those energetics without having to disconnect or try to shut them down or force them off is a complete shift in the entire relationship and dynamic that we have with ourselves and the universe and life and all the people around us. And that ultimately, that's the source point, that's the ground that is the game changer.
That is, yeah. No, and I love that part of, and I think, Qigong, what I understood it was, and I understood this from just the spiritual understandings that I've been able to experience within myself, is that when you are that tense, or when you are going into that intense energy, your body reacts. And that is when we see so many people in different, I'm going to say, disease states and different aspects of health.
Not at ease.
Not at ease. Their depression comes very easily. Anxiety is in every part of the day.
Yeah.
And when it flows, your body reacts very differently.
It's what you just said is critical. It's really clear, right? If you think about it, this tension and the capacity, I've said before, Qigong ultimately is the immersion and infusion of consciousness within. How consciously connected are you to all the layers of your body? How much and how clearly can you feel? Without that, there is no capacity to stop that tension from creeping in. And as you return consciousness to the body, part of the Qigong process is this process of reopening, reestablishing consciousness at deeper and deeper layers to reopen all the pathways and flows to smooth out the energy, and therefore achieve the results of what a natural smooth energy would be
in a body. Right.
So
the functioning of the body, what the body does on a daily basis, it all goes into one connection.
When it's aligned with nature, right, then it becomes natural.
Right.
I think we're getting the hand wave here. We definitely will be back with Steph. I think that was an amazing conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for having me again. I'm fascinated with everything about Qigong, and I think you do an amazing job to portray that of the teaching part.
I appreciate that very much, and I can't wait for part 2. Please also check out Steph's book, Roll Your Dice. Check out and obviously, us on YouTube, Instagram. Like it, follow it, comment on it, and all that good stuff. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Okay, thank you guys for being here today. If you like what you've heard, feel free to like, comment below. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Anybody that's engaged with anything that I've shared and actually tried and spent some time doing the practices, please reach out. Let me know how they're working for you. Let me know if you have any questions. Also, visit the website. There's a ton of free content and some wonderful programs over there that can really help you out. So thank you guys again, and I'll be seeing you soon.